And one of those issues of importance was addressed on day one. Where have all the young black men gone?
You know, if we're going to talk about saving black men, I think we really need to understand what we're up against. And what we're up against is what Thomas Jefferson referred to as the wolf. He said, we have a wolf by the ear. We can't hold on to him, but we can't safely turn him loose, because on the one scale, we have justice, but on the other, we have self-preservation. So the founding fathers made a conscious decision to create a system of slavery because they needed free labor to build the country. They put justice aside in order to do that. Slavery went away. It was replaced by a system that was designed specifically to drive black men into prison so they could rent them out to the plantations and the mines, and that was called Jim Crow. So that business model is etched into the American psyche and the American way of doing business, so that now in Louisiana, for example, 74% of the people in prison are black, and over 90% of them are men. And it's not because black men are genetically predisposed to make bad choices. It's because America is designed to do exactly what it is doing, which is drive black men into prison. And what used to be a system of control and exploitation is now morphed into a system of control and elimination.
We can talk all day about systems and prison industrial complex and all those different things along those lines. But my perspective is very simple, and that is, I know what the forces are outside my house. So if I am properly preparing that son inside of my house, it doesn't matter what they are throwing outside of that house. And so we tend, on this conversation, we tend to want to walk it where we start with F, we start with N, we start with P. I got to deal with A. I got to deal with what is happening when that child is in the womb. And then what happens when that child comes out of the womb? And then what happens when it comes to the decisions that we are making? We can talk about young black men. Somebody is having these children. Somebody is birthing these children. Somebody is dealing with how you're raising these children. And so I can't talk about some system unless I talk about the most basic fundamental system, and that is dealing with family. A few years ago, I wrote a blog on Essence.com where I said no pastor should have a baby dedication until they have made an effort to talk to the mama and the daddy. All these sisters lost their mind. You keeping Jesus from the baby. Why are you doing that? I said, I ain't keeping Jesus from the baby. I'm trying to make sure Rick, JJ, Jimmy, Lester is involved in their life.
Which is true. But for a man to be seen, he has to be there. And the fact is that our men are being eliminated, and they're not present and available in the numbers that they would be but for the effects of what I call the wolf. Now, you know, the wolf has profound implications. I mean, you take the men out of the equation, you destroy the family, you destroy the neighborhood, you destroy the community that people live in, and then it gets worse and worse with each generation, because you're exactly right. The positive examples that young boys and young men need, and they get a lot of them. There's a lot of us out here, hell, or not hell, but I mean, I feel,
go ahead and say hell.
Well, I run a university, and I feel like I'm father to thousands of young black men all the time.
What percentage of the young men in your university
would you get? Well, it's 70% women and 30% men, and that's probably a generous percentage. And you know, you see it happening systematically. You know, starting from the day that young boy is born until the day they end up in prison. How many of you all out there just wish that there were more good black men available? How many of you just wish there were more numbers of black men? I mean, you know, we are no better or worse than any other people. The problem is we just have less of us to spread around.
But when do we start though? See,
We do everything you're saying. Everything you're saying we should do. But what I'm working on is a way to make more black men available through the education system and through historically black universities, and by creating more black teachers to put into black schools.
But here's the fundamental problem, Doc.
Yeah.
When you have 35% young black men graduating in Detroit, 25% in Detroit, 40% in Chicago, when you have those rates, they're not even getting to you. So what I'm saying is we got to deal with it from kindergarten, second grade, fourth grade.
But see, the
because
thing is,
when you in college, you're not going to see them unless we confront them between 0 to 18.
This is why you have a diversity on the panel. I don't believe that there's one right answer. We all obviously have our strong beliefs. I can tell you, maybe it's just because this is what I do as a motivational speaker. I always come back to the individual. Because I had this dialogue just, I believe it was yesterday, when the gentleman picked me up from the airport. He asked me what I was here for, and I told him this panel, and he said, that's great. He started driving real fast, as a matter of fact. He got really excited. He said, look, I have a 9-year-old son here in New Orleans because, and he's in in private school because the public school system is awful here in New Orleans. That's his words, not mine. And so he said, look, you know, it's like all-out war here because the kids aren't graduating. They're not doing this. To Dr. Mason's point, all the stuff that we talked about. But he said, you know, what I have to do, though, is I always take my son +1. If I take my son to the ball game, it's my son +1. If I take my son to church, it's my son +1. So I understand that the wolf is out there and he's howling and biting and doing all those things, but just take one more. We don't have enough of us to go around for all of us to say that's somebody else's problem.
We often talk about this in the third person. We got to help these young brothers out here. And so typically I'll say, okay, when is the last time you had that real conversation in your own family?
That's right.
Because if you really want to be honest, you go to Big Mama's house, your daddy's house for a Sunday dinner, and let's be honest, most of us say, I don't want no static, I don't want no drama, I don't want people in my business, I'm not getting in their business, and you watching your nephew who's a fool, and you sitting there going, that's a damn shame. They failing in school, and this is what we do. We say, I don't want to say nothing. I just want to have a peaceful time and go back home.
Well,
so we contribute to the problem when we're unwilling to challenge even our own family member. But if you say nothing, don't assume somebody else is going to do it. That's why I say you start with your family. Because we can talk all day about somebody else's kid. But if you're unwilling to check your nephew or your sister or your brother, you're not going to check a neighbor. So you got to start just where you are, right in front of you, right in front of your doorstep. Because if y'all some Bible-believing people, go to Nehemiah chapter 2 when they rebuilt the wall of Jerusalem. They said, let us rebuild. But the most important thing, Nehemiah said, rebuild a portion of the wall just in front of your house. You do your part, and your part, the wall gets rebuilt.